and we will be uploading it to YouTube. And so I will send the link once YouTube approves it. It usually takes a day or two. I will send a link to everyone that has registered for this call so that even if they're not in attendance, they will be able to access this call on YouTube. My name is Karen Sahota, and I'm a consultant with Concepts Forward Consulting. I used to oversee our Mental Health Services Act funding in one of our counties, and retired last year to work on the PADS project, which is a very exciting project that I'll come back later and speak to all of you about. But this morning, I really wanted to focus on Laurie Hallmark's presentation, and she's our resident PADS expert. And so with that, Laurie, I would like to pass it over to you. One more aspect of housekeeping is, as I said, we will do question and answers for about the last 20 minutes. If you write something in the chat, if it's easily answerable, I will probably answer it as we go. Otherwise, we will hold all those until the last 20 minutes. So with that, Laurie, if you could introduce yourself.
Y'all can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Great. I'm Laurie Hallmark. I work at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid in Texas. And I do all things PADS. We cover about a third of the state of Texas, from El Paso all the way through the valley, across the central part, up to San Antonio, Austin. So we have a pretty diverse population. This is my favorite topic. It is my entire life, and this is my favorite audience. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that I do right by the importance of the subject as well as the audience. So I'm going to start with the big picture. That just enables me to ground myself in sort of what I'm thinking about. And as an aside to that, I will not look at the chat. So if you don't send me please any direct chats, because I won't read them. I have to focus on what I'm doing. And so I cannot look at the chat. Okay, so from human rights to civil rights. So this is exactly what PADS are all about. They're all about what my rights are as a human being, just by the fact that I am a human being. And a PAD is a way to take those innate human rights and really expand them into recognized and hopefully enforceable civil rights. And it's really from the individual to the systemic. So that's one of the reasons that I'm starting a big picture, but I'll try to go a little quickly through that part. Okay, Berlin Wall, deinstitutionalization. This is deinstitutionalization. It's the way that I view it. We all know what I'm talking about. When the hospitals were starting to be, well, basically in the civil rights movement, when folks started to realize, hey, you know what? Possibly having an entire giant population of people in institutions and segregated from everybody else might not be the best idea. It's perhaps not great for them, and also it's a disservice to society, because it's all of those human beings who then are not able to contribute, and society is not able to get the benefit of that contribution. So we know what those old state hospitals look like, right? Big, giant institutions. And again, they have been, largely either closed down or, their people have been released from them. And the idea, of course, with deinstitutionalization was integration, right? Deinstitutionalization to integration. We don't want people, spending their lives inside institutions. And so the deinstitutionalization, therefore. However, what has actually happened? We've just gone from one institutionalization to another, from one institution to another. And we all know this. This is not, I'm not saying anything that anybody that's new. So we all recognize that there are a number of people who in the past would have been, long-term housed in institutions, in state hospital institutions, who are now essentially being housed and treated in county jails and federal prisons. And this is obviously a real problem from a human rights perspective. It's also expensive. So this is just bad from every possible perspective. And it's not just jails and prisons, right? It's also people are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. It could be, you know, folks just facing evictions, cycling through loss of housing, and of course, going in and out of the hospital system. So this is our agreed upon set of facts. And so at least we have a concrete set of facts that we can agree upon, that with deinstitutionalization, the effect is that people, instead of being integrated into the community, are institutionalized in jails and prisons, cycling through hospitalizations, or cycling through experiencing losing housing and unsheltered homelessness. However, where we come to the difference is, what are we going to do about it? Right? So the narrative of, okay, so we agree on this big giant problem. What now? This is where PATS come in. So one of the possible avenues is to say, okay, well, deinstitutionalization did not work. It has led to institutionalization in jails and prisons. It's led to people cycling through homelessness and also cycling through shorter term hospitalizations. Therefore, deinstitutionalization was the problem. And so from that analysis, the solution then becomes, okay, well, let's look at reversing that and opening up the door to longer term institutionalization, kind of rolling back deinstitutionalization. That's one approach. Another approach is the idea that, well, you know, we've deinstitutionalized and we have these services that are available to people, and they're not working, obviously, because people aren't living integrated. And so we really need to try to force people to access the services that we are providing and that we think that people need in order to live integrated. So that's another option. What I suggest is that there is a different way. There is an approach that we haven't yet tried, or we're starting to try, and that is an opportunity to avoid returning to what, even if the best of intentions, are rights restrictions. And that is, let's find out what the person needs from their perspective, what they want from their perspective, and then let's shift the system to meet that need, instead of saying, okay, well, we have this system and we just need the human beings to do better according to what they're being provided. It's inverting that, right? To say that, okay, well, let's find out exactly what the person is saying that they need. Okay. So this is our spirit of a beautiful human being trying to live their life and flourish and grow. And in order to do so, this person needs water. This little plant, it needs water. And we know that everybody needs water. But the question becomes, how much and in what way is it distributed? And so this is where I think it's a good metaphor for the current way that things function. So I don't know if any of y'all have any kind of relationship with mesquite. I lived in an area with an abundance of mesquite, and I grew to be quite fond of it. It's a hardy plant. It's living its life in the best way that it can, and you know, any plant that can survive in those conditions, I just say props. You know, well done. But mesquite is still receiving water. This may not be a lot of water, so the quantity is not great. And the way that it receives it is not necessarily what it would be in a different climate, right? So that's kind of the way that I view the system as it stands right now. If you're mesquite, that's great. You're getting the amount of water that you need, and it's being provided in the way that is helpful to you. But not everybody is mesquite. Our little plant is mesquite. And so the avenues to say, well, how do we fix this? How do we address integration and the problems that have resulted from deinstitutionalization? The avenues that say what we need to do is we need to return to these big, heavy systems, these, you know, going back to opening up the doors for institutionalization and opening up the door for more forced treatment. This is the way I view those solutions. Our poor little plant. Our little plant just wants some water, just wants the water in the best way that it can receive it to grow and flourish. And when the system, in all its well-meaning efforts, looks at the problem and says, wow, what we need is just to throw everything at our little plant. It's not going to end well. And so this is where PADS come in. There's another way. And the way that we get to that point is we say, okay, little plant, you need water. How much do you need? And in what way do you need to receive it? And there are so many different options. And this is the avenue that we are not currently taking, but we can. And PADS are a way to enable this approach to be implemented and tried. Okay, so now we're beyond, we're back, we're to PADS exactly. So what are they? So PADS are a legal rights document. And I always have to pause here and say, while a RAP and a PAD are complementary, and it's a perfect opportunity at the end of a RAP, getting a RAP to bookend a PAD on the end of that. That's perfect opportunity. It's important to know that notarizing a RAP does not make it a PAD. So there is nothing that you can do to the RAP, notarizing it or anything else, that will turn it into a PAD. However, the information that is in a RAP is really helpful and can make the PAD extra substantive and powerful. And you do not need a RAP to have a PAD, but they are very complementary to each other. This is what it's all about. PADS are all about self-determination. If it's not based on what my decisions are and what I want, it's not going to work. A PAD is a self-determination based document. It cannot, by definition, be coerced. It has to be my decisions. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper, and it's just not going to work. So self-determination, self-determination, self-determination. This is the most important concept and word to remember when it comes to PADS. It cannot be coerced. It has to be my choices. I have to have the agency to make those decisions myself. It is a rights protection document. This is it is a document that enables advocacy to protect rights, as well as to enable services to be provided based on what the person says they want and need in order for integration to actually work. It's a preparation document, right? So recently I was working with a family member on a will and advance directive, medical advance directive, and this is exactly the same thing. It is a document that is for preparing for the future. How responsible is that? This is one of the huge ones. A PAD is a document that gives a person a voice. It is the person who owns that document, and this is why it has to be self-determination based. If I have a PAD, I own that document. It is my voice. Those are my choices. And in this document, it is my way to be able to speak what I need and what I want. It is your voice. It's a way for people to inform the system of what helps and what makes things worse. Because so often it can be, really seemingly small things can be a huge help. And again, seemingly small things can cause a great deal of damage. So it's a way to provide that information, as well as what I need and what I want. Okay, so why? PADS are a part of recovery. So, mental health challenges don't just disappear. So, I may never want to go back into a hospital, and hopefully that will never happen, right? But I will create a PAD so that I can prepare in advance just in case that does happen. It's a way to acknowledge, okay, yeah, you know what? I don't want this stuff to happen, but if it does, I have a plan. And so not only am I taking responsibility for that part of my recovery, but I have a plan so that if I do have a crisis, if something does happen, that my life will be interrupted to the least amount possible, to minimize the amount of disruption and harm that can be caused simply by having some kind of mental health crisis. This one is just, this is just a part of the essence of it, staying in control when things are out of control. If you have what your decisions are inside of a legal document, when things occur where you're not able to maybe express yourself in the best way, it's in a legal document. So during a time, let's say I'm in crisis for whatever reason, or, I'm not able to vocalize or express myself in a very clear way, or people just cannot hear me during the specific time. What they can do is they can look at my pad. That is my voice. And again, rights protection. So that's also what and why. So this is a way, this enables people to advocate for themselves, for their rights, to protect their rights. It also gives the people who are advocating for the person who owns the pad a way to really do their job to the best of their ability, because they're going to know what they need to, they have all that extra information. So it will not only enable self-advocacy, but it enables advocacy from a third party. Safety. So one of the sections that we have in the PAD is about law enforcement and crisis personnel. And so I think that there are a number of ways that PADs can be directly linked with safety. And one of them is to be able to provide information about what can help and what can make things worse when it comes to an engagement that could potentially turn into something that's unsafe. And that's also, safety is also a component when it comes to medications. We'll get to that. Coordination. So, what happens if you go into one part of the system and you come out, it's like you're a brand new human being. So person goes into jail, they're a brand new human being. They come out of jail and they go into another part of the system, brand new human being. Go into a hospital, I'm new again. So everywhere that human beings are engaging with the system, it's as if it's their first time engaging with the system, right? And so a PAD is a way to be able to distill the most important information, the most critical information, so that there is the ability to have coordination across those different points in the system. Feedback. So I can't take credit for this one. This was raised by a peer in Washington State. She said, what a great opportunity for feedback. And I hadn't thought about this to the system, where if you think about it, if you had, like, I can give you anecdotal, evidence of, oh, I know probably about 80 or 90% of my clients identify one particular most hated med that seems to be incredibly unpopular. I can identify certain types of helps and hurts that tend to be repeated. But if we had the ability down the road to look at, to really analyze what is the feedback that's coming out of those PADs, I think that it would be a really important tool. Accountability. Okay. This is where the PADs get to hold folks accountable. And by folks, sometimes I mean me. So we had a client who he had identified a place where he wanted to live. And it was a kind of like residential sort of place. It had a bunch of different, it wasn't like a nursing place, but it had those kinds of extra things. It's where he wanted to go. This was not, no one was trying to force him. This was his choice. Now, the problem was that he had debt in his past that was preventing him from being able to live there. So because I have the ability, because I work at a legal aid, we opened a case for consumer case and we sent it to our consumer team, and they are approaching it from their practice area and their focus, which is, this is a consumer problem, and we need to take the approach that we would normally do to address debt. So they immediately started doing all of their consumer law debt alleviation advocacy. You can tell that I'm not a consumer law. I don't practice consumer law. And so what they were starting to do was great if your goal was to eliminate all of the debt. And it was going to take a while, and there were all these processes that they were getting ready to initiate. And what we realized was, now wait a minute, this person doesn't need all of their debt eliminated. Now that's great if they were able to do it, but that's not the goal. what actually is their goal? Their goal is to get into this housing. His goal was to get into this specific housing. So now that we have that information, and because it was in his pad in one of the expanded sections, we're able to go back to those lawyers and go, hey, can we do a little bit of problem solving here? And so what they ended up doing is connecting with folks on the other side of that debt and going, look, this guy's never going to pay it all off. It's not possible. So let's look at a solution that will involve lowering that debt to a level that will enable him to get into the housing of his choice, and then coming up with a payment plan, to be able to pay off at least some of the rest of it. And that was a totally different approach than what would have been taken by the consumer team if they had not had that additional information. And so this is where we have the ability to impact what our advocacy is based on the pad itself. And let me tell you, our peers, like they hold me accountable. I mean, they really are not afraid to come. And I love this. This is what I want. This is what we need, is for them to come and say, hey, look, Laurie, I can see that you've kind of shifted to what you think this person needs instead of what they're saying. And this is in their pad, like, get yourself back on track. And that's what we do. And that's what the document enables. It is amazing how easy it is to shift from this is what the person wants to this is what I think they need. It can have that line, it can happen so quickly. And with the pad, having it inside a legal document in writing, that really enables the accountability that is so essential to being able to implement this avenue for addressing the broader problem. And I put this one last, but really this is the most fundamental component of everything. There is nothing more essential to being a human being, in my opinion, than having autonomy of your brain and your body. And if that autonomy is going to be modified or removed, then that should be a very high burden. The pad is at its most fundamental and basic, is a way to protect and assert the right as a human being to autonomy of brain and body. Okay, so the pad has a number of sections, and so I'm going to go through it. I like to think of it like a menu. Okay, so think of it as a menu. So not every pad is going to have every section. There are some sections that will be in every pad. So typically every pad is going to have psychoactive medication. This is just going to be a section that's standard in the pad, but we'll get to the point where there are additional sections. And so the way I like to think about it, the way that we do our work, the pad that we can create, for example, for someone who is experiencing unsheltered homelessness, where, pre-COVID, we were able to sit down with them where they are, meaning like outside, and create a pad. That's going to be a different kind of pad than we can create for a client that we have over a longer term, where we're able to have a relationship with them over a long term. Or if you think about it from a peer perspective, where the peer relationship is able to be developed and extended over a longer period of time. So think about it as a menu, like a buffet. Buffets are always, I'm a big fan of buffets. Okay, psychoactive medication. This is where you can talk about what are the current prescriptions that you're on. And so this one is always kind of a little bit startling for me, because I think about, if I'm on current prescriptions and nobody knows what I'm on, and I go into a hospital or I go into a jail, and suddenly I'm put on something else. Maybe I'm not, maybe I've had a mental health crisis. Nobody knows. No, it's no one's fault, but nobody knows what I'm on. And now I'm being put on other medication. So first of all, from just a safety perspective, this really concerns me. I mean, I think about, there have to have been bad interactions. It has to have happened. Just because I don't know I can't tell you any like concrete examples right now, does not mean that it has not happened. It has to have happened. People who are on, for example, I'm on like a month-long injection, and I go in after 2 weeks and no. How long have I been on mute? How did that happen?
Only for a second.
Okay, good. All right. I apologize about that. I have no idea how that happened. Okay. The other thing that I encounter a lot is people who have, it's taken decades. I've been on this one medication, or I've been on this set of medications for decades, or it took me a really long time to be able to work with my doctor and figure out what meds work for me. And now suddenly I go into a hospital and it's all shifted around. And so now we have another problem. So I've had clients who've said, look, these are my current medications. I want to stay on these medications, even if I'm in a hospital. Sometimes I need to write out the prices. Sometimes I just need to write it out. And so let's at least consider that. I always give the example of my client with the lithium, and this is where back in 2009, she went into lithium toxicity. She ended up going into a coma. No one knew it. Well, they knew it at the time, but fast forward, almost a decade, when I know her, I'm going through her past medical records and I come across this and I ask her about it. And she was on lithium currently at that point because no one knew. And so this is the way to provide information so that, there are not some serious safety issues. Also, things just going cold turkey off and on meds. It's obvious why this section is really important. And this is where people have the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't want X, Y, or Z med, and here's why. Or I have tried these are the meds that I've had in the past that I do know have worked. And so that may be something to consider. We also in this section include other treatments and assists because, I think we can all recognize that medicine is not, a panacea. There's no magic pill. And so it's very important to recognize that and to be able to put into the pad the other things that help, the other wellness tools. This is where WRAP information comes in. But what are the other things that I do in my life that enable my wellness? I run, I try to eat healthy. That's been hard during COVID. But we make sure that we honor those things and put them in here as well. This is a great opportunity, I think, to be able to provide information about what is meaningful in your life, right? So if one of the things that's meaningful in my life is that I like to be able to study. I like to be able to read certain kinds of books. I like to be able to cook. I like to be able to go out and socialize with my friends. So if that's what gives my life meaning, then I don't want a medication or an amount of dosage that's going to eliminate or make it so that I cannot participate and have that important part of my life. It should never be that the choice is between treatment and things that make my life meaningful. And so this is a way to provide that information to providers so that they have it, so that they know when they're looking and thinking about what they're going to do, that, hey, you know what, this is really important to that person. This is something that gives their life meaning. This is something that gives them joy. And so we want to make sure that we don't do anything that will impede that. The other thing is this is an opportunity for people to be able to say, you know what, there are certain side effects that I can't tolerate it. I'm sorry. That I'm not going to take meds that are going to cause this side effect. And it's another opportunity. We've had some clients who have said, you know what, I've tried this med in the past and it did work for me, but the side effects, I could not tolerate them. And so that's also helpful information for providers. Okay. Preferences for emergency treatment. So this one goes in pretty much they're always in all of our pads as well. This is a situation where it has been determined that there is an emergency. Typically it's going to be, we're thinking about inside of a hospital, or also it could be a jail, where a physical immediate engagement is going to occur, where the people who work there, this is the option that they've happened upon. And so we're talking here about forced medication, right? So, and not like I have a court order. but I have a, forced injection, seclusion, and restraint. So that's essentially what we're talking about here. And again, in hospitals and jails. So this is an opportunity for basically the first part of this section tends to be, okay, which of these things is the least bad? If you have a choice and this is going to happen, which is the least bad of these things? It does provide an opportunity to be able to give information about any conditions that that people need to know about. For example, if someone has emphysema or if they have a back problem, that's information that needs to be known in case someone is when it comes to like restraints. So, it would be helpful to have that information in advance, and hopefully that information can also help to reduce the frequency of some of these techniques. Here's where this section is great. This section is great because this is a situation where if you are involuntarily in a hospital, you're in a hospital, you're in a jail, when things start to escalate, right? I'm becoming upset. There's some kind of disagreement. There's a conflict arising, and we are quickly going to this point where there's going to be an emergency engagement that is bad for everybody. That emergency engagement is terrible for everybody concerned. The PAD is my opportunity to provide information so I have a voice at that point. If you think about it, if you're standing there in a hospital or in a jail and you're getting upset and everything that everyone's doing to try to help is making things worse, the PAD is your way to kind of shout, not actually shout, but from the page to shout and say, this is what you can do. This is what you can do so you don't do those other things. And that's what the opportunity is for this section, is to be able to provide tools of information for the providers and the staff and the people who are around if things are getting a little bit out of control, if there's starting to be some upset. So we have clients, it's really great because it's so individualized, and that's why PADs are just such a beautiful reflection of their owners, of the human beings who own them. We come up there, really people identify some fantastic tools here. Things as simple as, hey, will you offer me a Pepsi? I always love that one because someone was very specific about it being a Pepsi. But then also it could be another cold beverage, or, hey, please ask me what's wrong. Please offer for me to go outside to the extent that that's possible. I understand that's not always possible. Please ask me if I would like to draw. Please have a woman engage with me. Please call me by my first name. Please say sir, or please don't say sir. Please stay, 3 feet away from me. Please give me time to respond. There are so many individualized tools and tips that can be provided to staff inside hospitals and jails to reduce the number of times that you're going to even get to the point where the emergency intervention is going to take place. Okay, so practical matters. Here's where we get to the point of, you have a mental health crisis. Nobody wants to have a mental health crisis. It happens. You go into a hospital, or you're just having a crisis, whatever is going on. And suddenly, because of the crisis, everything else in your life has fallen apart because you haven't been able to prepare for it in advance. So then you come out of the mental health crisis, you come out of a hospital, you come out of wherever, and now you walk back to your life and everything is in an upheaval because you haven't been able to take care of these things. This is why this is a preparation document. So household matters. This is who's going to pay my rent, who's going to pay my bills, who's going to get my mail, who's going to take care of my cats, who's going to take care of my plants. And this is the opportunity. We pin it down so it's totally detailed. I'm talking about, I'm going to have, my sister is going to come over and she's going to look in the top drawer of my kitchen, and inside there is the list of all the things that she needs to take care of. It's truly planning, just like you think of with other types of pre-planning documents. This is the opportunity to figure all of that stuff out. If I am gone from my life, here's what's going to these are the people that are going to help me to take care of things. When it comes to finances, this is where there's an opportunity to set, for lawyers, this is an opportunity to create very individualized, very narrowly tailored instruments. So we can do very tailored powers of attorney that would only go into effect during very concrete, objective criteria, and then would go back, disappear again. But this is a way, especially with serious mental illness, when you're talking about a situation that's not static. People do not need to lose all their rights simply because they may go through a time where there's a financial issue. There's a way to address that in advance, and it's to go ahead and put these protections in place so that there's the acknowledgement of, yeah, you know what, I may have this crisis, but I have these plans set in place so that it can be addressed. I don't need to lose my rights. I can get through to the other side of this. Employment. First of all, this is a big advocacy area, right? There is such an opportunity here for so many great improvements and for so many just important assets to enter the workforce. It's not happening right now. That's a bigger conversation. However, if someone is employed, right? If you're employed, there needs to be a way for, again, I've named my sister, please call my employer, speak to this person, tell them where I am, whatever. So you don't end up coming out and now you've lost your job as well. Same thing with education. You can end up in really bad student loan debt. You can end up, failing out of school, and it doesn't have to happen. We can set up these, we can set this up in advance so those things don't happen. Probation is really important. So, someone who's on probation, if they suddenly disappear from their life, now we've got a problem with probation, right? Because now it's, you haven't shown up, what's going on. Maybe you violating because you're inside, aside from violating from not showing up to appointments, maybe it's a mental health crisis where there has been some kind of, or there's going to likely be some type of violation. This is the opportunity to be able to let probation know, put those parameters in place, go ahead and set it up so that someone knows that if this starts to happen, they need to reach out to probation and let them know, look, this person is having a mental health crisis. Let's see if we can go ahead and modify the terms instead of going into revocations. And not only is that best for the human being, but it's best for the system because it is expensive when they violate or when they're revoked. Now they're back in jail. All these things are, they work together, of course. And again, same thing with the attorney. If someone has a criminal case, they end up inside of a hospital, somebody needs to call their attorney, call their defense attorney and let them know, hey, okay, now this is where they are. This is what's going on. The smallest things like that, the smallest amount of preparation can reduce those just cascading series of negative events that can occur simply because someone is having a hard time right now. And it doesn't have to be that way. And the pad can enable the smoother transition and reducing the negative impacts of challenging times. Okay, information for law enforcement and crisis personnel. We put this in every pad. And we do it because our clients are able, it's very individualized. So I always like to give the shout out to crisis intervention teams. I've engaged with crisis intervention teams. There's one in Houston that's really phenomenal. I worked at a clubhouse in Houston before I started practicing law. And so I witnessed in person, the really amazing work that they do. But there's also even the best trained crisis intervention team, there is still individualized information that is critical that will help to de-escalate in a situation that can otherwise go very, very wrong very quickly. So when we work with our clients, we find out, okay, if you were going to have an engagement with law enforcement, what can they do so that things will go more smoothly? Or what can they do so that things don't get worse? What can they do to make things better? And again, like I said, it's really individualized. I have one of my favorite pads. They're all my favorite. They're just all very different. But he thinks that, and he knows that when he's well, he knows that when he's in crisis, sometimes he thinks that people are not who they say they are. And so he has developed a technique. So tell me you are who you say you are. Tell me you did not warp here. For combat veterans, tell me I'm not in Afghanistan. You know, so very, very individualized things. We have clients who want to make sure that law enforcement knows when I'm hearing voices, I cannot respond as quickly. Please give me time. Understand that I want to cooperate with you. Those kinds of things, just really detailed so that we end up keeping everyone safe and we avoid arrests. Because how often, not only can it lead to an engagement with law enforcement, lead to an escalation that can result in unsafe circumstances, but now we end up with arrests. And so now we have a whole other problem, right? And so to the extent that we can avoid any kind of engagement turning into arrest, the better off for everybody. We added this one in. It should have already been in from the very beginning. I love how much I learn, how much I've learned over time with this work. Hopefully I'm always improving based on, you know, my clients and other people who do this work really help me to do a better job. And this is one of the things that was so obvious that it's shocking to me that we didn't have it in from the very beginning. But so many people have, you know, diabetes. I have a client with had a client with stage 4 liver disease, unsheltered homeless, stage 4 liver disease. But she knew she had a doctor for that and she knew who it was. And we had like that contact information. So we were able to put it in her pad. Even though she's unsheltered homeless, you know, she had this information and when it was critical. This is critical information that people need about these medical conditions, because if they don't, you're not being treated for it. You're missing all of that treatment. And also what often happens is people who have mental health challenges seek out medical care, and the only thing that anybody sees is the mental health diagnosis. And so people end up not receiving the medical care that they need because of the mental health challenge, which is being exacerbated by the fact that there's a medical condition that's not being addressed. So this is what this section is all about. And again, just like with the psychoactive medication, we provide the information of additional treatments that help. So yeah, maybe I have diabetes, but I really have a special diet that I try to adhere to. So these are the things that I do to help me stay well physically, as well as in the psychoactive medication section, which is where we put, you know, mentally, although of course they can't be totally separated. And so dietary restrictions and special needs, I like this one a lot, simply because I think that it's just such an indication of respect that I have certain dietary needs and special needs, and those things are going to be respected. Okay, so the other things that we go ahead and make sure that we put in our pads is notification. All right, so what am I talking about? Let's say you end up in a hospital on emergency detention order. You're taken in. Nobody knows where you are. You may not be able to make a phone call, right? I mean, you're in a mental health crisis. You could have been medicated to the extent that you cannot make a phone call, and nobody knows where you are. And this is a problem. So what we do is we have a section in our pad that waives HIPAA for the purposes of notification only. So, and it's especially important if you have somebody who makes medical decisions when a doctor has decided you're not able to make a medical decision, that person is notified. So that person, if you're not able to tell the hospital or whatever, I have a pad, that person is able to say it like this, they do have a pad. But anyway, you don't want to be in a place where nobody knows where you are. You know, maybe your trusted supporters or your agent or whoever is trying to find you, and they're calling up the hospital and they're saying, you know, are they there? And the hospital says, I can't tell you. So this is what enables the hospital to say they are here, nothing else. No, this is what we're doing. No, this is why they're there. No other information except for this human being is inside this hospital, so that you have that anchor to the outside. Again, with designating agents, this is where you can name and create a medical power of attorney. It's a little bit, think I'm not entirely sure exactly how it works in California, but basically it's when a doctor decides that a person is not able to make a medical decision for themselves, this other person gains the power to make medical decisions. It's really important in the context of the Psychiatric Advance Directive because that person has the ability to initiate the pad being used. And then sometimes hospital preferences can be accommodated and sometimes they can't. It really depends on the area. Additional sections, and this is where you really come into the opportunities for more broad-based advocacy that can really get to those underlying issues that are exacerbating the problems that are associated with the lack of integration, and not just address the problems, but actively move toward a better way. Okay, so for example, with housing, and you have to have a longer term relationship with the client to be able to do these kinds of sections, right? That's why peers are just so critical. So with housing, I always like to give the example of our client who she was doing pretty well, and then she started having all kinds of problems, and she was yelling at the neighbors and this kind of thing, and she was at risk of being evicted. And we have in our housing team, this happens all the time, we have people that are coming in and out and in and out and in and out, always facing eviction, and our housing team can fight against that. And they are amazing advocates. I don't know how they do their job. It's really a hard job. But they fight against eviction again and again and again, but it's not solving the underlying problem. It's the same people keep coming back, every 6 months, every year, or whatever. They're having housing problems. They're at risk of being evicted, again. And so the pad is the opportunity to be able to find out, okay, what exactly is going on? So with this client, right? So on the surface, the problem is that, she's yelled at some people and she's made them upset, and now the landlord wants to evict her. On the surface, that's a problem, right? Okay, but what actually is the problem? And when we pinned it down, what we found out is that what's the problem is that she's not been able to sleep. And that's causing a problem with her mental health. And why is she not been able to sleep? Because she's on a ground floor apartment and there are people above her that are new, that they moved in, and they walk around at night and they keep her awake and they're disrupting her sleep. And so now she's having mental health challenges that's causing her to yell at people. I mean, honestly, I would probably want to yell at people too if they're walking around all night and I can't sleep. But anyway, so that gives the opportunity now for the advocacy for, okay, we need an accommodation, but this is the specific accommodation that we need. And we would not have known that otherwise. It's also a way to really figure out and pin down what are the supports that are needed in order for someone to maintain their housing. So this is where we get into, for lawyers, post-Olmstead litigation. This is where we get into the opportunity for really figuring out how to address these essential integration components. So for example, this is a common problem. So we have a client who has a history of trauma. And suddenly something breaks in their apartment and it needs to be fixed. Okay. So now you have the landlord who needs to have this thing fixed. The client, the person living in the tenant, they want this thing fixed too. However, now we have some maintenance men that need to come in and fix it. And now we have a problem, right? We have a person who has a history of trauma. And now we have the apartment that would just normally do this sort of thing, standard things, send some maintenance folks over, come in, fix it or whatever. This is a problem for this client because they have a history of trauma and some random people coming into their apartment, who knows when, is not going to work. And so it is very easy for that one thing to turn into a conflict between the tenant and the landlord. And now we have a housing situation of fast hurtling to eviction. This is where supports can help, right? You can identify that, look, the problem here is not that I'm, a uncooperative tenant or that I don't want this thing fixed. I definitely want it fixed, but I have a problem because I have a history of trauma and I don't want these men coming into my apartment like this. And so we need to figure out what the accommodations are, and I need a supporter to help me communicate that. So that's the way that if you have this additional information, it provides the ability for advocates for different areas to be able to have a legal document that identifies this is what the problem really is. these are the accommodations that would help with this, and these are the supports that I need in order for those accommodations to work. Same thing with education, right? So had a client, it's like, it's great to, Rachel, I think it's going to be to 1. So we have, it's going to be 7 minutes. Okay. So maybe less. So education, we all know that they're supposed to provide accommodation, right? But what exactly are the accommodations that I need? I may not know that right away. I may need to work with somebody to figure out, okay, what exactly are the accommodations that I need? And once I can do that, now I have the ability for an advocate to take these solid accommodations and go, hey, this is what this person needs. Same thing with employment, exactly the same thing. Additional sections that we put in trauma triggers when we have the opportunity to do that. Safety plan, I think that this one is really important. I had a client who we were worried, not to the extent of threat to self or others, but we were worried about suicide potentially because his brother had just committed suicide and he didn't know it yet. And so we talked about it and we came up with some plans in advance, and we had it in his pad. And later he told me, oh gosh, a year or two later, just out of the blue, he told me that he really appreciated being able to talk about it, to be able to talk about suicide, because every time he had tried to bring it up, people would freak out and shut down and immediately go into like panic mode. And he apparently appreciated the fact that we were able to have a conversation and go, okay, I get it, right? Like, you think about this sometimes, let's talk about that. We don't want it to happen. So let's try to put some parameters in place so that it doesn't. It's an opportunity for that. And there's a manifestation toolkit. This is more like the wrap stuff of, these are the kinds of things that I notice when I'm starting to struggle. And these are the things that can work to alleviate that or make things better. Peers are critical. Everything about PADS. Peers are critical for PADS. Peers are critical for outreach. Why? It's all about who's providing the message, right? And are they credible? Many people can mean very, very well, but they may not get it, or they may be in a position of power. So the outreach needs to come from people who are 100% committed to self-determination and really understand. And so peers are the best people to do outreach by far. There's just, in my experience, there's just no comparison. The creation of the PADS, helping someone to create a PAD. It's again, peers are really instrumental here as well. The PADS that are created, let me just say first that PADS can help, lawyers can help clients create PADS, and those are great PADS. Law students can help clients, people can be trained to help clients create PADS. The peer assisted created PADS are better. They just are. Peers understand what the person is going through. Peers have they have that knowledge, they have that credibility, they have that problem solving ability. It's going to be a more open and equal conversation. It's just amazing the difference of, again, I would never want to limit people's ability to get a PAD because there's not a peer there, but the peer created PADS are just extra great. And I think that peers are critical here as well because of if the PADS are not self-determination based, if they are a part of coercion, they are not going to work. And so the process of creating the PAD, maintaining the integrity of that process, making sure that it really is the person speaking for themselves and not I'm trying to suggest all of these different things. That is where peers are really critical, as well as an implementation. Again, like I said, with the accountability, where our peers, they really do, they give me the smackdown sometimes. And then for policy, peers are really critical moving forward for advocacy, for policy, for PADS. So again, peers all over the place. Peers and PADS go together. So going back to, just circling right back around to the essence of the problem that we addressed in the beginning of the effects of deinstitutionalization. Society is constructed, and therefore our system is constructed by and for beige boxes, middle of the bell curve. The system is a beige box. I love beige boxes. They're great, super helpful. But not everyone fits in a beige box. And that's sort of the essence of the big picture dilemma, that instead of expecting or hoping that people will squeeze themselves into the brown box, the beige box that we're providing, or that we're going to try to squeeze them ourselves into the beige box that we're providing, that PADS are a way for the system to learn to accept and serve more than beige boxes. A PAD is a way to liberate the colorful spheres from their beige boxes. And this is what hopefully we will eventually get to. So thank y'all for listening, and I'm going to turn it over to Rachel now, and I will mute myself.
Hello, everyone. Rachel Chambers, and I'm a peer, and I'm also the co-founder of a nonprofit called Painted Brain, which provides mental health technology-based services for peers and practice training in technology and clinical mental health. As a person with lived experience, I'm here today for a call to action for peers across the state of California to join us, Painted Brain, in advocating for peer-informed, peer-led psychiatric advance directives. As a person that's been hospitalized involuntarily several times and even given medicine that almost killed me, I know too well of the impacts of not having a plan when you're not well. And I've heard too often from peers across the state that have suffered tremendously, either being hospitalized or interacting with their housing or not being able to provide them with the support or even law enforcement, because there's no document to guide or inform their wishes. And the outcomes for Blacks and Browns are more significant for our peers that interface with these systems. Until my work with Painted Brain and with the state, I had no idea what a psychiatric advance directive it was. I didn't know that there was a self-driven legal document that could spell out my medical, my health, and legal wishes when I was hospitalized. After working on my PAD with Laurie, I've been more confident in how I will be treated when I'm hospitalized. I mean, when I was hospitalized, I was also working at one of the highest levels in government and was ashamed and didn't have any court of how or who to tell when I was in the hospital. And a PAD will give me now a chance, the opportunity to improve not only my plans, but also my decision-making in my life. The peers are the best to support in the creation of PADs with the legal community, because we understand what it's like to be hospitalized, arrested, and displaced in life. Additionally, we need more culturally and linguistic personnel that can provide us additional support and outreach and engagement around PADs, so that more communities of color can have access to these documents. Through our advocacy work, we're working with the state partners on advocacy efforts to hire more peers with mental health challenges to get psychiatric advance directives. My call to action, once again, for peers is to contact your local peer-run organization or your local behavioral health department and ask them, what are their plans to do? What are their plans to support and implement peer-driven psychiatric advance directives? Or you can also contact us at Painted Brain after you contact your local peers and county department at hello@paintedbrain.org to join us in the national network of peers working across our great state of California and our nation to advance psychiatric advance directives for peers. Once again, I want to thank you and call you all to action to get involved and advocate. And thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to talk to you actually about kind of the what's next for California. And I will share my screen. This is always a trick for me, I tell you. Okay, I think I did it. Let's see. Now I don't have access to my chat. Never understand Zoom completely. But as soon as I'm done with this, I'd like to put up a survey. It's a Survey Monkey. It helps us improve our process and making sure that we're getting the appropriate information out in pads. So as soon as I'm done with I just have a quick presentation on kind of, again, our next steps in California. I'll put up the survey and then you can do it on your own time or you can do it really quickly, and then we'll go into question and answer. So let's go ahead and scroll on down. So what we're looking at now as the state of California is, for those of you that know Mental Health Services Act, each county receives some funding under Mental Health Services Act, and part of that is innovation dollars. And an exciting aspect of innovation is truly being able to take a thought, a concept, and really bring it forward in the state. And it doesn't have to be now. It doesn't have to necessarily be something that's made up and never been done before. But one of the interesting things about PADS, especially in California, is until recently, how many people really knew about PADS. And so being able to look around the world, PADS are everywhere. However, they're not really promoted in California, though they're in 27 states in America. So this innovation project is gathering multiple counties together to create really a call to action and really standardize PADS and PADS training in California. We currently do not have a PADS statute in California. The last state was Colorado in 2019. They created one, but we in California don't have a PADS statute. There is a PADS form that is on the National Resource Center's website. It's NCR. So if you were to type in NCR PADS, you would actually see a form. But if you look at that form, there's just not a lot of detail with regards to the psychiatric aspect of it, but it's very medical driven. So we'd really like to, in this project, these are our goals. Now it's innovation. So we really get to create and change and move together as a county, as counties. We have 5 counties on board so far. And obviously we'd love to have more counties on board because we truly want PADS to be standard in California. So the project is to provide standardization in training to really help communities and stakeholders understand PADS. This is not about rolling out a document and saying, great, everyone, let's train you on filling it out. It really is helping communities understand, why is it important? Training our law enforcement, training our NAMI organizations, training our peer organizations, but to really understand how PADS can be useful not only for our consumers, but for our law enforcement and for our hospitals and crisis teams. We'd like to standardize the template statewide. So taking what the NRC currently has and having work groups with consumers and Painted Brain and those that want to be involved within the counties and our state to really look at what's the most important information to have on that pad, and what is the information that our consumers really want our state and our law enforcement and our hospitals to truly understand. We're going to create a standardized toolkit and house it in one area so every county has access to a standardized training, so that it isn't a guessing game, but we'll actually have a training protocol along with the pad and videos that help. So if a county doesn't get on board now, or an organization doesn't get on board now, we'd be able to go to this video library and be able to play a video to say, this is what PADS are. This is how we utilize them. This is how we train in an entire training platform. So creating that toolkit. Again, to align, if we look at the direction that the government is going in the state, it is aligning medical and mental health care. So aligning those advanced directives and the psychiatric advance directives. And I have a typo there, I apologize. It's advance, it's not advanced with a D. We want to utilize the learning management system, again, part of that toolkit to be able to house that material and be able to just easy access. We are actually creating currently with our 5 counties on board, we are creating it we are identifying 7 written languages and 2 verbal languages and looking at how to do voiceovers for training, but really looking at 9 threshold languages in California. We really want to train our PADS and train our peers and utilize our peers in creating PADS, just like Rachel talked about, just like Laurie talked about. really being able to use that lived experience to really open up that dialogue and trust. And in the research, it shows that if an individual creates a pad, they have more confidence in coming in for treatment or feeling listened to, and knowing that law enforcement or hospitals are going to be able to utilize those pads to help in their time of crisis. We want to create a fully functioning PADS platform, a cloud-based platform. And in all my research in the entire world, PADS, as I said, are worldwide. The one failure of PADS is the inability to access those PADS. Where are they? How do we have easy access? What information is even gathered? And so we want law enforcement, we want hospitals, we want crisis teams to have that instant access in a crisis, and utilizing the peers and the consumer voice and consumer advocacy to say, what is the most important information that you want law enforcement to have? What is the most important information that law enforcement needs? It's not that they need the entire access to the whole pad, but maybe it is, okay, I know this person has a pad. I need to make sure that I'm talking to them face to face. Don't stand behind them. Maybe offer them a bottle of water. And so just being able to find out who their support person is, and really looking at how to utilize that pad to reduce the recidivism in jail and incarceration and hospitalization. Can you imagine calling a support person because you have that at your fingertips and being able to help connect that individual in crisis to their support person? And so ultimately it's creating this platform, and it will literally propel California as the only state in the nation that has instant access to pads. But that takes some creation. And so really involving the stakeholders and involving our consumers in that dialogue. What is the most important aspect that you would want to see in an interactive cloud-based system? And then legislation. We want to go to our politicians and say, you need to enforce the use and acceptance of pads in California. And so looking at a bill on really, and also being able to get the digital signature, especially now, COVID's really shown us that we need to move out of the paper state. And how do we utilize our technology to protect and to also add access, but to really standardize pads. And then always outcomes driven. I mean, there's no point in doing a project if you don't know how to correct if something's not going the direction that you think it should, or that through the data and through surveys and to truly listen to the peers and our different agencies to say, wow, that didn't really work so great. Okay, how do we pivot to make it work the best? Because ultimately, at the end of this 4-year project, we are fully functioning where any organization at that point could truly utilize the PADS platform with a standardized training, with a template, with an access point, and an area where we can upload pads. And so all of it is innovations though. And so do we have all the answers right now? No. Is that what part of this next year is going to be? Absolutely. And so we really look at the whole next year as being those conversations and those gatherings. And so just wanted to share kind of what those next steps are as we look at moving forward with an innovation project. And Laurie, I see that you have a comment. No? You took yourself off mute.
Yes, I was in preparation for questions.
Oh, you're so funny. Okay, so I'm gonna close down my screen. We're gonna open it up for questions. And if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen on the right-hand side, it says reactions. If you click on reactions, there's a raise hand. We are asking for the most because we have 54 people on the call right now. So we ask that you raise your hand. And then we will be able to call on you, but I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm also going to put into the chat box the survey. So thank you for your time. Stop sharing. And please, if you have any questions, go ahead and start raising your hand.
How could we support you guys in getting this started so that we can get implemented? Because I'm very excited about it. Well,
supporting it really is going to your counties and keeping in touch with as we are putting out our meetings. There will be several meetings. So everyone that registered for this will get our next set of meetings. There's a large symposium that's happening on May 5th. UCLA and the Sachs Institute is hosting it. So again, we'll get you all that information. And we just encourage the conversations. So the difficult aspect of Mental Health Services Act is that oftentimes the funding is already allocated in the counties. And so they may not have the capacity to join this project. But being able to just continue to keep an eye on what's happening and bring that information to your county and to your stakeholders. The idea is that we're going to go forward. And like I said, we have 5 counties currently interested. We have Fresno, Monterey, Shasta, Mariposa, and Orange County, all interested in moving this project forward as a statewide initiative. So it takes time. So even if your county's not able to join now, they're still going to always have access to the material as it goes forward.
How do we get on the list? This link was actually forwarded to me, so I joined because I was interested and excited about it. But how do we get on the list so that way we could assure that we're also getting the information?
So I actually have an attendance list, and if you've registered for this, I have your email, and so I send out all the information via it. So you're on my listserv.
I didn't register, so how do I get you my email?
Oh, if you could just if anybody did not register, someone else registered you, just put your email in the chat box, and I'm able to gather that information. And then
just to note, Kieran, if you guys don't want to make your email public in the chat box, you can feel free to send that chat directly to Kieran or to either of the 2 co-hosts, either myself or Wes, and we'll make sure that Kieran gets it if you don't want to make your email
and
public.
You know what? Let me put my email in the chat box. That is very true. Zoom is very public, and I tend to forget that. I apologize. And as I put my email in the chat box, we have and I apologize. Last name is England. We have a question.
You're all good. Thank you very much. My first name is Jehosabaya. You guys can call me Josie. Yeah, much easier. And so I was wondering about, because there's a RAP app, as probably most of you guys know, is there any way that it could, a pad could be HIPAA compliant and on an app on your phone?
Mm-hmm. That is such a beautiful comment, because that is exactly what we're looking at. And so as we look at a platform build, we are looking at the most security as possible and completely HIPAA compliant. The fabulous aspect of it is as we look at folks that actually know how to do the back end build, the integration, we only work with organizations that understand the HIPAA compliance, and it will be easily, because it's cloud-based, so it'll be easily accessible from a phone, from a laptop, from a desktop. So absolutely, I love that. And then we have Steve McNally.
Hello, my name's Steve McNally, and I'm from Orange County. Love the presentation, and I think we need to get Laurie to come to California and sit down with our ACLU out here, because you frame the discussion in a way that makes it pro civil rights, and civil rights law in California is a big complication. So I got a couple of questions. One is there a federal law that protects me in California, even though we don't have a statute? If I have a pad in California, why wouldn't it be recognized? Because my understanding is that a lot of times, even if I have one, it doesn't always get recognized. And then I will follow up with you on a list of legislators that are mental health friendly, and then suggest a few people that you can get to. And then I guess my second last thing would be, given John Sharon in Los Angeles is such a big mental health advocate at the state level, and one of the few behavioral health directors in the state who's not afraid to offer an opinion in public, What's his view on this? So I see they're missing.
Yeah, LA has
Thanks.
not chosen to join this project. I do know that Dr. Sharon is very active and very supportive of PADS. I can't determine why counties choose or do not choose to join a project. Again, it could be just a matter of their funding doesn't allow them to at this time. But I have been, I did speak to Los Angeles, and they were on a call a week ago. So, we always keep our fingers crossed that as counties learn more and more about it, if they can fit it into their capacity, that they would be able to join. And like I said, if a county can't join now, it's okay, because this is an ongoing project. And ultimately our goal is this will be statewide. And so regardless if the county is able to join or not, they will have an opportunity to provide PADS within their county. And then one of the questions I cannot answer, and Laurie, I don't know if you can, is the first one on why I do not have a legal background. And so the aspect of why they are not recognized in California, that is not a question that I don't know, Laurie, if you can answer that.
So I think that it's analogous. The problem that you've just hit upon is it's the same with medical advance directives of, how do you make sure that they're actually being used and that they're being followed. So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. So I think that that's why I don't know of any way federally, although you are very kind. I cannot think right now of how, there would be, I'm not gonna sit here. It'll happen later where I'm like, oh gosh, you could actually take this route or that route. But nothing is popping into my head right now. I think the way to really focus on it is twofold. Number one, get it into the California, into the state, so that there are enforcement mechanisms. And so it's very clear. But also because it makes so much sense, the people who need to be implementing the PADS, it is in their best interest. It is in the system's best interest. It is in the best interest of law enforcement. It is in the best interest of civil rights, human rights. It is in the best interest economically. There is a way, we have a section in our PAD, I didn't address it, but it's effective communication. So it's straight out of the ADA, and it's all about people identifying both supporters that can enable, that can help facilitate communication with supported decision-making, as well as identifying the accommodations that people need within the context of legal representation and inside the courts. And so the idea is to be able to enable lawyers to more effectively represent their clients, as well as to avoid and reduce the number of people who enter into the competency realm. In Texas, competency is criminal, and capacity is civil. So I think that twofold, the straightest line to get to where we need to be with PADS is in the state legislature and then community building. And I don't think I totally answered that question, certainly not entirely effectively, but so since I know that I'm at the limit of what I can contribute in that, I'm going to stop talking. But thank you very much for your kind words. You made my day.
I'd like to go to Danny Gibbs.
Excuse me. So I have two questions, kind of. And the first step was kind of answered, but I'd maybe get more out of it. My experience of being hospitalized in a psychiatric unit is one of loss of power. And when you enter in a situation like that, you almost feel like those who are in authority at that hospital, whether it be a nurse or whoever, is quite the authority above you. There's a hierarchy. And I know when I talk to others or work with clients who, when we talk about hospitalization, these are not people in these situations who often feel empowered to be able to stand up for their rights and their need, and I've had clients talk specifically about hospitalizations, that this is great to have a resource like an advanced, like a PAD, but how do I feel supported if I am hospitalized to enforce the PAD without having to rely on my own initiative, which may be compromised in a situation like that. And then my other question is how can we reach out to hospitals? Because in my mind, the best place to reach the people who would most benefit from a pad is those who have been in hospitals before. Can we reach out to certain psych units to provide that kind of information to their patients?
Okay, so there's, let me see if I can. So you're absolutely, the way that you phrase being disempowered in that situation is 100% accurate. Like there's no more appropriate word than disempowered. So when it comes to, so you're not, if you're in a situation like that and you're not able to clearly express what you want, right, or what will help, that's the pad where it's your voice. But now it becomes, I understand what you're saying, of how do I make sure that my voice is being heard and that my voice is being respected? And I would say, number one, if we get it into statute, then that's how it becomes a situation where they know that what they are, that they're aware that you have one, and that they understand what the law is when it comes to respecting and abiding by the pad. The second part I would say is an education component, where there will definitely need to be, just as the pad makes sense collaboratively from folks all across the different parts of the different systems, there will need to be education on, this is what it is, this is what you're, this is what it can do, but also these are your obligations. I think that we can get there without, you can have the teeth over here, but I think that that when the system, people in the system truly understand what this has the ability to do, that it becomes a yes, we want to move forward with that. And when it comes to, if you're in a psych hospital or something and you need your rights, this is where you want a lawyer, right? This is where at the very end of the day, when all things, if the world was a great place, there would be no lawyers. So that's what lawyers are for. And this is where it's a civil rights thing. For our pads that we have, we always have a contact number on it for us. If you're in the psych hospital, call us. We have a copy of your pad. We want to try to help you. There was one other thing I think that I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Well, and the one thing I just want to address, Danny, as well, is that part of this innovation project is what we've heard from counties in Orange County and Fresno, and some of our really large counties, especially, really want that community engagement and really that conversation with law enforcement and hospitals. And so again, this is not about rolling out pads tomorrow. This is about truly building understanding and training, because that is honestly, when we look at the downfall of pads that have been tried numerous times in multiple states, multiple counties, multiple countries, a lot of the failures, the lack of understanding, the lack of training, and really that cohesive message that we are going to create in California. And so I really appreciate the aspect of the fact is, yes, we will maybe be able to train in our CIT programs, to be able to train our hospitals and our IPUs. And that is an actual specific conversation that we want to have with all of those entities. So 100% I agree with you, and training is going to be one of the most important. And when we have this ability to have a platform, we want to train to say, look, this is going to make your job easier, and you're going to be able, and when we talk about a reduction in cost and truly what's in the best interest of our clients, I think that also helps aid that conversation and training. So
I remember the last point that I do want to address is very, very quickly about is people that are in psych hospitals. Here's a problem. We're going to need to, it's much better to reach people when they're not in the psych hospital, because if somebody's actually in a psych hospital, they do not have agency.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And Kieran, there was one other thing. You kind of touched on this, so I just wanted to pop in. Is there anything else there, based on some of the comments that we had in the chat box? They might have moved a little fast. Is there anything else you can say about why we're doing this as an innovation project, and how being an innovation project can tie into, innovation and advocacy, how they can tie together, et cetera? You kind of touched on it, but I just wanted to circle back on that point based on some of the chat box.
Well, you just said it really accurately, is the aspect of being able to use our innovation dollars really are to be able to, this isn't an exact science. And the fabulous thing about innovations is we get to create, but we get to involve our community. This isn't, if we look at our components on Mental Health Services Act, you have prevention or PEI, prevention and early intervention, which is very specific. We have our CSS, or community supports and services, which is really where this would fit in the long run, is that outreach to our consumer population. But that's very specific too. And so the aspect of innovation and being able to really utilize our innovation dollars is to be able to it's really all encompassing. We can do stakeholder process. We can look at building a platform. We can look at involving peers and peer stipends and really being able to engage all counties together. And it's really, I mean, if you look at the aspect of what we really want to create in California with legislation, a platform, a training tool, peer involved, a template that is not, somebody at the state going, oh yeah, this makes sense what you put in, but to actually create something that is completely peer involved, to be able to involve law enforcement and hospitals in those conversations, to be able to look at tying into CLETS at the state level, so that law enforcement would know at the dispatch level, oh, hey, this individual has a pad, so let's tell the officer on call that's been called out, hey, just so you know, CLETS has shown that there's a pad. And so all that is incredibly innovative. And so that is one of the aspects that's so valuable to our MHSA dollars, is the aspect of innovations. And so that's really where, in the aspect that we can get counties together. So counties can band together to do something collaboratively as a state. That in itself, I mean, come on, there's no other state in the nation that can do that. And so we're very blessed here in California to be able to have this opportunity. So thank you, Aaron. Aaron was from Fresno, who's on board with our PADS project. And poor Ashley. Ashley, you've been waiting so patiently. So please ask your question.
I had a quick question because I have not formally been trained in RAP. However, I join in on their check-ins for Fresno. And I was wondering if there was a way that I could get your information to the facilitator, so that way he could possibly join in and get on board as well and bring in other RAP facilitators, because they are so complimentary.
You're in Fresno?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you can email me directly. I will send you a, let's see if I can find you in here. I'll send you a private, if I can find it.
And also, Ashley, you can reach out to Aaron, Reinbolt, who's on our call.
I'm gonna say, I might actually have Ashley's email address. Yep, I have Ashley. I can reach out directly to you. Don't even worry about it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I love it.
And by the way, yay. I look forward to working with you, Ashley. I'm very excited.
Oh, I'm very excited. I took the 16 personality tests and I am an advocate. So here I
am. Awesome.
That's funny. I just learned about that from my daughter the other day. Any other questions? I just want to be mindful of folks' time. I don't see any other hands up, but if anyone has a question and just wants to take yourself off of mute, feel free.
This is Steve McNally again. I just want to mention something that you may or may not be aware of, but the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission, the Client and Family Leadership Committee, is totally dedicated to the SB 803 peer implementation. So as it was presented today as making this a part of peer civil rights in a way, y'all may want to get engaged in those meetings. And the Department of Healthcare Services has also had a fair amount of community engagement meetings already on the topic. And I haven't heard this come up yet. And then if there are other counties like John Sharon and others that aren't participating but are supportive, I think it's really important that that be made known to people, because it will broaden the acceptance of the project. And I I sort of echo the question about innovation because, I mean, it's great for innovation, but I mean, there's tons of money that's being unspent across the state. It could just be done locally. So one other thing would be, is there anything that a county ordinance could do that would impact this before going to a state of process?
A county well, the difficulty with a county, I mean, any county could probably create an ordinance, but then we wouldn't have a consistent project. There would be zero consistency. And the difficulty is Los Angeles had tried pads years ago. I know that San Diego had tried pads. There's many counties that have tried it individually without success. And so part of the aspect of joining together and banding together is that we really have the I don't know, almost like that we've got the wave of movement that truly can change. And it's very difficult to do it on their own. I mean, as we know, it's because it just hasn't been successful. And then when you have the aspect to have, not every county can do a platform, but when you band counties together, you can create a platform.
Yeah. Excuse me for a second. I don't mean to, I understand doing it statewide is better, but given that, you know, California became number 49 out of 50 for the peer certification, and already there's so many states that are doing this, even though we spend a ton of money. It just, whatever could do to speed up the process would be helpful. And in my personal experience, been not so much a money issue, or not so much we don't know what to do. It's a really a willingness and an openness to doing it. And that's hard to legislate. So you have 1,000 people in the state that are natural allies. 900 of them are on behavioral health boards and commissions. 40 of them are on the California Behavioral Health Planning Council, and 15 of them are commissioners at the OAC. All of them are legislated to be supportive of mental health. And I guess I would suggest that you consider using them actively if you want to push the message. And unfortunately, the behavioral health boards and commissions have sort of been marginalized around the state, but they are a network for you to use. So,
and thank you for that. I received an email from Teresa Comstock, who oversees the Behavioral Health Board and Commissions, and they are sending us a letter in support of this project. So I appreciate that, and I will probably reach out to you so that you can help me advocate. So
yeah.
I have one comment. So most of what you were just talking about is California, like detailed things that's Kieran's realm and not mine. One thing I will add is that just as the PAD is a way for it travels with the human being throughout the system to be able to provide that coordination, the PAD needs to be able to travel across boundaries. It needs to be able to travel across county lines with the human being. So I am always about let's do the work. Like I'm always about that. Yeah, I'm not saying this is a way to like put any kind of halt on that. I'm just saying that there is a component there that's really important, that the PADs can travel across the boundaries with the human being.
I have a
so
question.
Laurie, if I have a PAD in another state and I happen to get something in California, will that PAD that's acknowledged in another state be accepted here or not?
I don't know. I at this point, I have no idea. I think this is like a big blank. However, this is one of the things that I'm excited about with this project is we have the opportunity, because we've been pushing so much in Texas, but we're limited in what we can do. Like we don't have all these great resources that y'all have. We just don't. But one of the things that I'm hoping is that when we work on the template, that we're able to create a type of consistency and at least the format and what the document kind of how it is. So in anticipation of the PADs being able to go across boundaries, across state boundaries. And when they do, for the person in the new state to not go, oh my God, what is this? It says it's a PAD, it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before. So these are, you're asking, I am going to be so excited when we get to the point where we're actually, you know, addressing that from a concrete, like, here's our human being that's got their pad, that's moved into the state. Now what do we do? It's going to be awesome when we get to that point.
That was my question. I travel a lot in the country and out of the country. Is there a way to make the pads international or even national and international? Because
I would say, yeah.
Let's do it.
You know what? I think that's all. I mean, I think these are all really good comments, because this is part of what we would want to do as we move forward with the innovation project, is look at how do we upload a pad from another state? You know, do we have partnerships with other countries? Because there are other countries that will that provide pads and are accessible. So those are all great questions. But right now, do we have the answer to that? We don't. And that's part of why we want to have this project move forward. So
my question was more, if I do a pad in California, once it's available, I'd like to know that that's honored in other states as well as internationally. So that way I don't have to have a pad in every one, because I like simplicity.
So this is why we need peer mobilization. This is where on the ground, grassroots, bottom up, rally together. We want pads everywhere, you know, fight for rights. That's where that happens. So right now the answer is no. And where that push is going to come from is ground level peer consumer pushing for rights. And then all of the advocacy organizations that are right there shouting for them as well. That's how that happens.
And of course, California, as the leader in this innovative project, we would love to be able to offer that ability for other states to be able to see our platforms, to be able to have our template, and why not be able to push that out to other states and say, here, we've created it for you. Please join us in this effort. So to be continued on that aspect. Anyway, we are 10 minutes over, and I just want to be respectful of folks' time. This recording takes a couple days, but it will be up on YouTube. I will send you that information, a copy of the PowerPoint as well, a copy of our innovation project abstract. And as soon as we get information, actually, you know what I can do? I will send an email to everyone that's registered, and then any other emails I've received. There is another PADS presentation. As I said, we're just doing a series of these right now as just to really engage and involve folks in what's happening. But on April 7th, which I believe is next Wednesday, we have another presentation. And then April 22nd, May 5th, and May 13th. May 13th will just be full question and answer. But as we get the schedule, UCLA and the Sachs Institute is taking over and running those meetings. And so I will make sure that we get a list of our upcoming dates and the Zoom logins, and we will send that out so everyone can go ahead and sign up for all of them ASAP. I just want to thank you so much for your time.
The one next week is going to be heavily focused on the opportunities within the criminal justice system. So just a plug for that.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Again, enjoy the rest of your day and your week. And thank you for taking your time out with us today.